Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Another day, another wave of drama. This time it's in the Challenger scene that never seems too far away. Breaking Point released the top 20 Challenger players of the season last night, and as expected, all hell breaks loose on Twitter. Loads of players not happy with their placing in this list, saying that it was biased in some way or another. Doug Censor Martin comes out with some pretty heavy words as well, and we'll dive into it in a second on this one. He does, in fairness, bring his own list to the party as well, but all sorts of drama in challenges. What does it mean for the future of some of these players and what their prospects might be, and especially with Rostermania continuing on, what some of these guys on the top of the list might potentially look like in terms of CDL rosters going into next season. But very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. So a couple of quick things. This was noted by Adam here that there was a bit of a trio playing what looks like some Apex Legends. JoeDeceives, Fame and Ghosty. We think that Ghosty is going to go to Thieves with JoeDeceives is the current rumor. So there is potentially something in that. Fame, it's unclear. I know that people have actually linked Fame to teams like Boston as a potential option, because I think Fame, when he was actually on the SMG for Minnesota Rokkr last year, did a pretty respectable job. Maybe they want to keep him around. I think he could be an option there, and I think he could get better. It's one of these players that finds himself, it's kind of like JoeDeceives in some sense. Probably a pretty good SMG player, but you never get to really see the ceiling of him if he's on a pretty difficult roster situation. It's the same thing with Hook. On Guerrillas, he looked bad, but you put him on OpTic with a better system, and for a time he looked like one of the best SMGs. Still Hook inconsistencies and not a perfect player by any means, but Hook looked way better on OpTic than he did elsewhere, and I think it's a similar story that you just look better in a better team. That's generally how these things work. Crim is also on his way, and I imagine now landed in, well, he flew to Dubai, and then I think it was the trip over to Saudi Arabia for the finals of the Ren Sports tournament that Crim's getting up to. So, yeah, very excited to see how he gets on in that one. Hopefully he's got some good content ready to go for the entirety of the tournament week. But let's dive into this Challengers drama. So there's always Challengers drama, but this time it's a pretty big deal, and I definitely wanted to dive into some of the stories around this that have been brewing, let's say, for the last several months. So this is the top 5 of the Breaking Point top 20 Challengers players from the Modern Warfare 2 season. The boys put this together every single year, and they always do, as far as I'm concerned, a pretty damn good job. It is difficult to rank Challenger players. You've got to consider different regions as well, at the European region, the NA region, other players from other regions as well. When you're talking about online play, LAN play, it's really difficult to fully get a picture of who the best players and, you know, who deserves to be at the top of this list. Putting together a top 20 as well and getting it ranked well, you've got to consider that 95% of Challenger players will be unhappy with their placing on the list. That's just how it's going to be, and I understand that perspective. But also I think they need to understand that perspective, and the fact that these type of things take a lot of effort to put together. The boys, EasyMac, iHoldShift, Omar, like finding the clips, putting this stuff together, creating the content around this and the buzz around this and trying to promote the Challenger scene, it's a lot of effort. It's taken weeks of effort to put this together. And, you know, then you see some reaction from the Challenger players and you think, well, what's even the point anymore? And I think a lot of people actually feel that way, and we'll get into why in a second. So these are the top 5 players. Weeman gets number 5, then Gwyn, right, who was the Seattle Surge's sub. Maybe there's an argument to say there that I should have brought him into the starting team. Neptune gets 3rd, and Neptune is like, he's an interesting character, right? Because this guy, when he came to the Pro League, looked alright, actually, at the end of the Cold War season. Wasn't really anything special in Vanguard, and was dropped down to the Challenger side. But then when he was in Challengers, just absolutely fries. Like, he is so difficult to beat in Challengers, it seems. But couldn't quite make it work in the Pro League, so I do think he'll get another chance. And typically, at least of the top 10 players on our list that we put together, 7 or 8 of them will probably find themselves in the league next season. That's the historical average that we've had. And, you know, GodRx is definitely up in the conversation. He got number 2, but aBeZy, number 1 rated of the season. This was the overall list, right? So top 20 down to top 16, 15th to 11th, etc., etc. And look, it's difficult to do these lists. How heavily do you weight stats into the conversations? How heavily do you weight LAN play versus online play into the conversations? It's, and okay, certain players maybe took steps away, or they were on better or worse teams. It's really tricky. Now, iHoldShift mentions that putting this together was done by players, so players voted in this, casters voted in this, and also media people as well. I follow challenges, like, I follow the storylines in challenges. I like to keep up with who are the best players. I can't say I watch too many of the challenges tournaments, but when I'm at events and stuff, I'm speaking to Shift and the other guys just to understand what are the big stories, like who are the players to watch, who's looking good, and this type of stuff. But I wouldn't say that I'm, you know, in a good enough position to actually comment on what the order of the players should be here. So Shift and the other guys, a lot of the casters and even players have voted on this to come up with what the list should be. And part of it is related to stats. That's certainly a relevant conversation. But if we look at, Crone looked at the kind of record. So in Modern Warfare 2019, 7 of our top 10 made the league. In Cold War, all of the top 5 did. And in Vanguard, 8 of the 10 did. The 2 other ones were aBeZy and Mohawk. So typically the results here look pretty good. And aBeZy says, so aBeZy is probably one of the only challenger players that's going to be happy with this ranking, right? Because he got number 1, so he's going to be happy about it. Thanks for voting me as your number 1 player. Biggest year of my career so far. Looking forward to show everyone what I can do next season. And he's certainly going to get the spot in the league somewhere. We don't know if it's going to be Thieves or maybe Vancouver Surge, Seattle Surge, whatever. That's the question. But then, as absolutely everyone can predict, we then get into the, as Benji and Nassim will describe in a second, the Crybaby Cheese. So here we go. So we get Vikul in the replies. This list is absolutely terrible. Now, well, I will say fair play to Doug, because he criticises the list a fair bit, but then he actually does put together his own list. And I do respect that, because if you're just going to say the list is terrible and, you've got it completely wrong, it's like, all right, what have we got wrong? What do you need to change? Because often you'll see that these challenger guys, and Vikul is technically in the Pro League, but he has his boys in challengers. He wants them to be rated better. And look, these lists do have some, I'm sure that to some degree, the coaching staff looks at these lists to consider what they're doing. If they look at the lineman cards, as we talked about yesterday, they probably look at these lists to consider who are the best players. So they do have some weight. But at the end of the day, they are a production that easyMac and Shift and all these guys put together over weeks of work to make this type of project happen to benefit the challengers community, to give more exposure to that scene and to those players. And yes, some players won't be happy with where they place, but what is the preference here? Do we not do this? Do we not even bother covering challenges? Because sometimes when you cover challenges and challenger players respond in the way that they always do, it does make a lot of people think, and easyMac and these guys included, what's even the point, right? Bothering to make this type of content, because a lot of the time the challenger players just aren't happy about it at all. So, I mean, Vikul isn't in challenges, but I'm sure he's speaking on behalf of some of those guys. And in fairness, he might end up being on the sub bench for the Miami Heretics or whatever it's going to be, and therefore still be playing in challenges. Doug says, hey, let's take lion card stats or lineman card stats and apply our logic to make it a list. My bad for being toxic. I don't understand the way they come up with these. So, and then we get Pentagram, who says, don't let these lists bother you guys. I got MVP of the season, not a single interview the upcoming year. It doesn't mean anything. He was on the Boston Breach Academy at the end of this season. He was the Thieves' substitute player during the Vanguard year, I think, but they never really required him. A little bit interesting, because Ronnie actually does say on Reddit here that he has some indication that some team wants him to be a substitute Pentagram for the upcoming year, and it's tough for guys like Pentagram, right? I think, Pentagram's a good player, for sure, and if he had a different gamer tag, and, if he was 18 and cracked or something, because I think he's, in terms of challenger players, he's a little bit older than, let's say, the average. If he had a different name, he probably gets picked up, but it's just the way it goes. When you're a little bit older, then, people want the 18 and cracked kid that nobody's ever heard of that could be the next Simp. That's just how it is when you're looking into challenges, and Pentagram unfortunately falls on the bad side of that. So poor Shift is here trying to explain what's going on. It happens every year. Top 20 challenger players gets put out, everybody hates on it, most of the top 10 get picked up in the first month. People act like we don't watch this game for a living or something, and people are like, oh no, Pentagram should have been there. And then Shift goes through and says, look, his average placement was 9th, this was the average at Opens, this was his KD in the Elite. His numbers just aren't good enough to consider the top 20. And then Pentagram says, oh, I don't care about this year's list, but I left, a bad squad to join a struggling Boston and took them to 2 third-place finishes, and Doug rates Pentagram very highly, and Shift is like, fair enough, they're both tangible and intangible elements here, but, the numbers that are steeply below the top 20 line can't really be considered on that sense. So, Pentagram says, I don't care about this year's list, but then, of course, explains why he needs to be on this year's list. And I get it, right? The players want to be on the list because they want to get picked up, and it is important. But the way that many of us see it at this point is that there is no set of players and community that is more ungrateful to some of the free work that is done in the scene to promote their scene than the Challengers players, as far as I'm concerned. You see it again and again and again, and I don't want to trash in these players too much, because I think a lot of these players have been grinding for years to get a spot in the league. The league is very competitive. It's difficult to get in there. And a lot of them are just straight up salty and jaded that they don't get a spot. And a lot of that frustration gets taken out on people that are trying to do good things for the scene. That's the way I see it, at least. And maybe Doug falls into that category. Maybe you don't think he does. Tweet your thoughts in the comment section below. There was some more drama on this as well, actually. So Doug tweeted this and then deleted it. So Steve is a co-owner of Breaking Point. And, he is not involved in actually deciding the way these lists look. That is completely completely out of his domain. He is an agent for players in the league itself, and Doug's argument is basically, well, how can you co-own a company and publish stats that are, you know, related to some of those players? Which it's like, well, first of all, if you're publishing stats like the Lion Man cards and literal numbers on the website, like, the stats are unbiased at the end of the day, and Steve's not involved in what these lists actually look like. So I failed to see how there's this like crazy conflict of interest that Doug thinks there is, and it's like, well, what would you prefer? We just don't publish any of these lists? I mean, you know, sure, you don't want us to cover challenges, we won't cover challenges, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, I just see this this tendency creeping out everywhere. And look, in fairness, as Austin says here, Easy Mac, and also Shift, it's like, well, you know, maybe in future they'll do a bit more explanation as to exactly how they've come up with the list. So Austin says this year, for the first time, he just doesn't care about what people think. Like, can't make everyone happy. First year, haven't worried about that. And I think that is the correct attitude to have. And as Shift says, I guess next year we'll do a recording of the finalist conversation. So many people seem to think we just slap the names together. So maybe that would be nice. A bit more transparency on that one. And yeah, Ben JoeDeceives says, me coming over from Oppenheimer and seeing the challenger scene, Crybaby Cheese again about a top 20 list. Happens all the time. And yes, Senior Bala, if I say what I think, I'll be suspended 6 months. No, go off, King. So Ben seems to be of the opinion that, yeah, the Crybaby Cheese is back in it again. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. I will say, though, to Doug that he did come up with a list. His list was kind of funny because he put Jimbo number 0, which is also pretty good, but this was his overall list. But he also excluded Boston Academy and, like, CDL Pros and, like, LAN-only analysis. So I guess I can understand him excluding his own team, Boston Academy, but it's like, if you're not going to put some of the players like Pentagram on there, given that you just gassed him up big time, it's like, well, you know, you can't take the list as seriously. But anyway, he comes up with a list which, in some senses, isn't actually too dissimilar. I mean, there's a few similarities, there's a few differences here, and it's pretty difficult to do. He gives some honorable mentions. But, yeah, I don't know. At least he came up with a list, because it's very easy to criticize and then not say anything after the fact. But that's where we're going to leave it for today. More challenges drama, more will be to come. Doug always gets involved in some juicy stuff in the off-season, so, you know, it's not going to be the last time he's going to be on the thumbnail, I'm sure, over the next several months. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.